All right, it is Friday, June 23rd, about 30 minutes after the closing bell on the markets today. Let's take a look at the price action for the week on the indexes. NASDAQ futures had an interesting week. It ended up closing last week pretty high up after a really big week, touching pretty close to this topping resistance here at 15,500. And has since pulled back. It's this area of local support at 15,000 that it's kind of touched on and pulled back up from a few times, but this does look a little bit weak in the short term. We could see that break lower, but keep in mind this 15,500 area of resistance hasn't quite been touched yet. We could easily see this move back up here. We'll have to see what's going on. What do you think, Price?
Yeah, I like it for a little bit of a retracement here. I was just looking at it on the inverse, and there is a 4-hour short you could take.
You want to show us that?
Sure.
That sounds great. So you've inversed the chart.
Mm-hmm.
So up is lower and down is higher.
So I see this right here is the last point where it was trying to hold. It didn't. It kept going down, which is up, but it's all good. And so that's why this right here was a good short in anticipation of it going this direction. So we flipped the chart just to get rid of try to get rid of the bias, just to see it from a different point of view. And since things move the same direction or opposite directions in the same manner, it works out.
Yeah, I mean, it does look a lot clearer. I mean, like you're saying, that looks like it's respected that a few times. And we do have this nice gap here that could easily, that looks like prime for filling. I mean, it looks that way on the other chart too, but, the non-inverse chart, but obviously it looks a lot clearer here too. So we could easily see that play out in the coming weeks. Very nice. You want to move on to the S&P 500 futures?
Sure. It looks similar on the inverse.
Yeah.
There.
So we're still inverted, of course, but
yeah.
It's kind of had a more interesting week. Unlike the NASDAQ, it actually had a bit of an upside and then went lower. So, see it kind of having topped out here on Friday and moving back down to this resistance level and popping back up slightly. But this could easily break in the short term. That's the thing about the S&P and the NASDAQ have been closely trading in relation to each other, so there isn't too much difference to say. We do also see that gap down here lower at 4,300. You can easily see that filled. And I would bet money that if the NASDAQ gap fills, so is the S&P. That's a good initial short target right there in the short term. In the longer term, that's all near term, but the trend is still firmly bullish, in my opinion. Let's go ahead and do this so it's easier to look at. This period of higher highs and higher lows is still continuing. You could even see that trend respected all the way back down to about 4,200, and that would still look good for higher over the longer term. So keep that in mind if you're going to trade the pullback short. You're going to want to trade with the trend, ideally. Kind of keep an eye on these key levels, 4,200, 4,300. But there isn't too much to say other than this week, we pulled back to that initial level that we broke through here, a little over 43.80. Might as well call that 4,400. You have anything to add?
I just really like the look of all those weekly candles. All of this trying to punch up through, and we finally have. So that's why I like this as big, fat, chunky support.
Yeah, at 4,200?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks really good. if it got there, that would be a juicy long for sure. So that's something to keep an eye on.
If you could, you'd be looking to hold that one for all-time high.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
and that would definitely give you the necessary liquidity to make that move.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to the RTY small caps.
Mm-hmm. Kind of in a similar pattern, but like you said, on the higher time frames here, it still looks good for up.
Yeah.
On the daily, it doesn't look very appetizing right here, but just a little bit lower, and that's a pretty good daily trade.
Yeah, I like it there too. Now that, like you were saying, that I was talking about earlier. If we look at the weekly chart, you know, it's been in this range of, wow, our chart is really not cooperating. Anyway, it's been kind of consolidating in this range for over a year now, right? So, you know, it's hard to get too excited, you know, thinking, okay, well, it could just pull back from up there. But the key thing that we're getting at is that this kind of area of consolidation in this box that we drew, there's this level here where we see a lot of these daily tail touches. That's a perfect level for a long to see if that holds and to move higher. And you could even, if we pull up our position tool, take a trade there and you place your stop below, let's see, oh no, it worked, cool, right below that candle right there, this red candle, with your target being the high of the range. That's a 6.4 to 1 risk-reward ratio trade. That's a really good trade. So keep an eye on this area. This previous consolidation box could act as support for the next leg higher. It would still look good, like price only TA was saying. It could still see that bounce higher. So it could be a great trade. Look for that to pull back into that range in the next week or so. Otherwise, there isn't really too much to talk about this chart. It's breaking out of that range, moving back lower, potentially retesting that local area of support on the daily chart that we're talking about. Before it gets too exciting, we're going to need to see it break out of this range, though. This area at 19,080, sorry, not 19,000, 1980 and 1680. So we need it to kind of break out in either direction to see a, you know, continued move. But for now, it does look good for higher. So. Alright, let's move on to the Dow. This one was a little interesting. We actually see this having attempted to break out last week, and it actually closed twice on the daily above, but then it came back down through there and closed below many more times. So it looks like that's potentially another false breakout. We've seen that in the past. One thing to note about this is two closes above that range, so on the daily level, it looks like we've kind of gained some ground there potentially, but it does look like this will probably pull back a little bit further before seeing higher. You could see this come down maybe to 33,400s here, and it would still look really good for higher if it bounced off from there. Otherwise, I think the next level of support would be down here at this 32,800-ish level, where we've seen it kind of touch a few times. That is a little bit less reliable, I think. That would make it its fourth touch. That would get into the range of me thinking it might not be as reliable to hold, but anything could happen. Those are kind of my thoughts. What about you?
Yeah, I like a trade up here, and then the next spot being right about here. But there is, of course, this is a pretty decent level here as well. That was not exact. I'm real shaky today on my mouse for some reason.
Cool, I like it.
And that's significant because of this level. It tried to hold that and then failed, but punched back through it. So that's why it's a significant level to me. Anyway, that's about it on that one.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably sit here and analyze this range on the Dow a little bit more and find a bunch of pretty solid levels, but at a glance, I mean, it does look like this will probably retrace a little bit lower.
Right.
So that's kind of what I think will happen in the short term, at least. So let's go ahead and take a look at gold. Gold finally did something, you guys. It broke out of this consolidation lower, and it looks like it's going to hold that lower level. We see it attempted to kind of break out of this range before, but then it false broke out, moved back in. See two closes below the range. That signal's probably going to see a bit lower. And the next area of support is going to be somewhere around 1874. So look at that level for a nice potential long there. But we could see this come all the way down to 18. I think this is around 1820. Yeah. Before it looks spooky if it loses that. But again, keeping in like kind of the trend of what we've been talking about, right? It still looks good for higher if it holds this 1875-74 level, right? That would still be a continuation of the trend of higher highs and higher lows, higher highs, higher lows for the next move up. But until we see a more decisive move down, it's tough to say where it's going to go. It is kind of fiddling with tested support, so you could see that hold. The fact that it is tested means it'll be less likely to do so, but we still need to see more price action before we can be sure.
Can we look at the weekly real quick?
Sorry?
Oh, just the weekly. I wanted to.
Yeah, still looks good on the weekly.
Yeah, it still looks really good on the weekly. And you can see on the weekly why this level is here at 1870, because on the daily it doesn't paint the same picture right in here. I mean, it does. I like that. That's really good action there. Or
yeah, but on the weekly you get to see the length of how well that's been respected over time.
For years it's been fighting this level. And what I see is all these closes up here, up above in the high section. So I see it holding and continuing up.
Yeah, especially in compared with past price data, like it hasn't closed as often as it has in that area until recently. So it does tell you that it does want to move higher over a long period of time.
Okay.
All right, let's take a look at oil. Oh boy, oil. Man, it's, there isn't really too much to say about this chart. We've kind of talked a lot in the past about how it needs to regain this 73-60 area before it kind of really decisively moves higher. It's also been respecting this area maybe around 68-ish for, well, quite a while now, like, 5 months or so, 4 months or so. And, until it breaks below 63 even, 63.50, is that where we have that level? 63.70, it's touched there and kind of moved back up, but until we see this range broken, you can't really say what oil's going to do. Now, the only thing that you might be able to say is that it's starting to look more bearish because it is having more closes below this trend, this area of resistance, whereas in the past it was consistently closing above it. This is starting to look weaker as time goes on and it consolidates and keeps closing below this 73 level. So that's something to keep in mind. I would be pretty cautious about longing oil until we see it kind of either break out or get back to a lower support area.
Yeah, I wouldn't long oil till 64 at the very highest.
Exactly. Cool. Unfortunately, there's just not too much to say about that. So,
real quickly,
go ahead and move on to the dollar index. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Oil doesn't look too much different on any of the other time frames.
No, it really doesn't. Here's the Dixie.
Okay. Well, I feel like the dollar is finally potentially starting to kind of rebound higher here. Kind of had a couple of, had a rough week or two back here where it came back down. Now, interestingly, it did find support here off this 102 level from back in March. We can see that kind of was the topping resistance area on this range, so that's why we know it's a level to pay attention to. And this was the start of the uptrend just above that, and it came back down and respected that twice, and now it's bouncing higher. So we could see the dollar move higher, potentially breaking out above this 104.6 level that it reached previously, and that would still potentially being a bit of a reversal of the trend for higher, where it's been going lower, right? This would have been, you know, your higher, I'm sorry, your lower high. That, I know that's a bit extreme, but kind of that's what we're looking at here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, all the way down here, and we see kind of this double bottom formation at 101.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this is the first leg higher where we see a higher low. So that could be the first sign of reversal. But we do need to see it break above 104.6 to actually confirm whether or not we're going to have another higher high. Should look the same on the weekly chart.
Oh. Yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead. Looks nice and clear there too.
It really is.
See those two tails that reach in there and grab their liquidity and move higher? That looks nice.
It does look like it. It's gonna see over 105 on this leg.
Yeah, if it was gonna make a higher high, it would have to.
Mm-hmm.
That would be traditionally and fundamentally you would expect that to coincide with a pullback in the market, but hard to kind of correlate all these things together, but we'll have to see. I still think that we are going to see this dollar index move higher. I think we could easily see over 105 or 106.
I agree.
Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to KRE, the banking sector ETF. This made a big move this week. So 5 red days in a row, not the greatest week for the banks. But that's not surprising after the Fed chair said that he was going to raise rates 2 more times, or at least predicts that he's going to. We tried to trade technically here, but you gotta at least understand that those fundamental factors are going to affect certain aspects of the market, and raising interest rates is one of those things that does hurt the banks. So the banks reacted to that and they moved down. Now, technically speaking, this level here that's kind of been flirting with, this is that major level at we'll call it 42.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of acted as support, then resistance, and back to moving down below that. So we're gonna have to see this find support somewhere else. Now the next support that looks good is all the way down here at 36.7. So that's gonna be another big move. 39.50 to 36.7 is, what is that, like 8%? It's gonna be a big move if it gets there. So we've gotta find some more support somewhere. The thing that's a little scary about that is that would, to me, you could kind of argue semantics on this, but that would kind of hurt the whole bullish trend, right? The reversal, like we had the low here, higher high, higher low, higher high. But if we're going to consider this a higher low, then if this breaks down below there and makes a, find support here, that's going to break this trend of higher low. So I still think that 36.7 is a great trade area for a long, because it just offers such a great risk to reward ratio, right? You would take your long there, and then you just put your stop below the low here on this red candle. I know you can't, there's so much red volume there, but that's actually a red candle.
Mm-hmm.
You can just drop your stop right below that. That way you know that if that breaks, that's going to kind of go lower, and you'd have a great risk to reward ratio trade there. But who could know what will happen with the banking sector with all these other factors going on? You have anything else you want to look at on the chart?
I agree that it's just a super obvious stop loss, which I've said it before is a good enough reason for me to take a trade, because I know that's the number one thing that most traders are looking at is what's my risk to reward on this.
Yeah, I would bet, and that would be another, might even be closer to 8-1 trade on that.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm totally wrong, but somewhere around 3.5 to 4-1. Still a great trade. Anything over 3-1 is, I think, exceptionally good risk to reward ratio.
I agree. And you only need, roughly 40% hit rate to be in a good profitable trader.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, depending on your win rate, but still, that's the thing about risk to reward ratio. The stronger your risk to reward ratio is, the more tolerance on your win loss ratio you can have. So I think risk to reward ratio is everything in trading. But if we don't have anything left to talk about on the chart, that'll wrap up the Trader Hub weekly market analysis. If you like this kind of stuff, if you like analyzing charts, or just want to have a place to speak with other traders and grow in a community together, share your ideas, you can join our Discord server that is linked in the description below. Hope to see you there. Thanks again. Take care.